Welcome, one and all, to another episode of the Witness Titanic Podcast, the first inquiry into the sinking of the RMS Titanic in over a century. My name is James Penca, your chairman of sorts, as I conduct interviews with witnesses of her great story, from modern Titanic experts to even survivors of the sinking, and in this case, black and white films, apparently, all in the hopes that we might navigate the uncertain waters of the Titanic legend, uncover what actually happened in April of 1912, and hopefully all witness Titanic ourselves. Folks, welcome to the final episode of Witness Titanic Season 2. This season, I am proud to say we have called 13 witnesses to the stand across 18 episodes and 10 bonus testimony episodes over on Patreon. As always, it has been an absolute pleasure to bring you this testimony, and like you, I will be counting down the days until Season 3. As a reminder, I'm taking a little time away from the podcast for the holidays, but I hope to start up again, ideally around March, possibly April. Speaking of April, clear your schedules for April 11th through the 14th. We will be holding a massive in-person Titanic anniversary weekend on the RMS Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. The proceedings will include lectures, music, meet and greets, historians, actors from the 1997 film, the annual THG Real-Time Sinking live stream, and even a recording of at least one Witness Titanic episode. So if you are interested in joining us for the weekend, attending a live recording of this podcast, and meeting other Titanic folks in person, believe it or not, follow me on Instagram, where I will be posting all the info about the weekend. And yes, there will be a little discount for my patrons. But April is 4 months away. Whatever will you do until then without Witness Titanic in your life? Well, over on Patreon, we have decided to, as a group, we're going to read the book A Night to Remember and discuss each week in little mini episodes, one chapter at a time. Should be a great way to keep your Witness Titanic appetite in check until we start up with full episodes next year. With all of this out of the way, let's get back to the movie at hand. Let's see the dramatic conclusion of A Night to Remember. All right, folks, to get this off to the right start, just so we all have the movie in the same place, I have paused my version of A Night to Remember the moment that the kitchen appears after the lifeboat is being lowered, where we left off last time. So if you pause it right when it starts, you should only see the kitchen and that first third-class passenger walking in the door. And that should be close enough for us all to start. So let's all press play in 3, 2, 1. So we are in the galleys here with the third-class party trying to find their way up to the boats. And we get this wonderful moment here that you don't get in any other Titanic film that I'm aware of. The third class seeing first class for the first time. What a absolute shock it must have been. I love how this movie keeps showing that cart wheeling around on its own. That makes an appearance in the musical, in the 90s musical. It's a big part of it. If you know, you know. Now we're back in the general room open space combo. Third-class passengers still being held back. And now we have the band on the boat deck with our clarinet. There's a flautist as well. So a very different kind of orchestra than was on Titanic. And we get a little moment here of an officer taking a man out of the boat, as did happen in real life. Women and children only. This is Lighthauler's side of the boat. Now, Miss Russell, Edith Russell, an actual Titanic survivor. Not the actress. That actress is not Edith Russell, but this is meant to be Edith Russell, and she's going to do something she did in real life. She ran back to her cabin and made sure that she had her little pig, her, I assume, ceramic pig that was like a music box type situation. You could wind it up and it played music. And she literally did take it with her. And now we have a gentleman we've not seen before. I've scoured the movie to see if we've seen him earlier. I don't believe we've seen him before. He's putting on a little pin. This man, I won't ruin it. He will come back later. We will find out who he is in a few scenes. I don't know what the pin signifies. I'm sure it comes from his testimony. I should look into that. Or you can. Go look it up. What was that pin about? Let me know in the comments. And now Mr. Hoyle, this sort of fictional first-class man, has had enough with Jay Yates and these other first-class men who are starting to get a little worried. And we're back with the Chief Baker. So he's had a drink, he's helped load a boat, he gave up his spot in a boat, although that may not have actually happened, and now he's just having a great time. And that character does appear in 97. He's on the stern with Jack and Rose, as you'll recall, taking a swig from a flask every now and then. Now we're checking in with the wireless men, the wireless boys, that it's still just Carpathia. That's the only ship in the area. And looky here, Harold Bride gone to get the life belts, as he said he did. Back with Quartermaster Rowe setting off rockets throughout the evening. And that's something he just mentioned, that that he saw some flashing, but it must have just been her masthead. That is something that was said in various testimony, that maybe there was a Morse lamp being flickered, but it also could have just been, the masthead light flickering. So it was kind of impossible to know. And I think both people on Titanic and Californians said that about each other. And here we are back in the third class space. And here we are with the third class party finding their way on deck out of what looks like a second class stairway. It's not an exact Titanic replica, so it's hard to know where they just came from, but it looks like they just came out of the second class stairs. Now here's a famous moment. It is in both films, 97 and this one, of a woman falling between the boat and the side of the ship. This actually happened, though in real life she was taken in through a deck below, and then I don't believe she ever came back up. But now here is the moment where the third class women have to separate from the third class men. But these men did well. They did what not a lot of third class passengers did, and they fought their way up. They found their way to the boats, even though it made no sense how to get up there. And they all got their women away safely. So at least they did that. Now we're back with our second class passengers. And you know what? I guess I lied. There was a second class space. This one cabin. And I suppose the hallway that the third class passengers ran into the Chief Baker. But here are these two lovebirds having a romantic moment in their second class cabin. So there you go. A Night to Remember has more second-class spaces than James Cameron's film. This is cool. This is showing Maggie Brown going down the ship. I believe she says in her testimony she remembers looking in the windows as they were lowered. And so they kind of show that here a little bit before she realizes that there's not enough men in her boat. And this is, as you may recall from episodes of Witness Titanic, this actually happened. This lifeboat stopped lowering and they called up for more men, and there's our guy from a few scenes ago who's putting that pin on. He says, "I can go if you'd like." This is Arthur Puchin. And this is exactly as it is described. If you're sailor enough to go down the fall, you're welcome to go. And he's like the right age. He's a bit on the older side. Somebody in the comments took issue with me calling him old because he was like 53 or something like that. I only mean to be doing something like this, to be going down a rope. If I had to do this at 34 years old, I would not be able to, I don't think. So credit to him. So that's a very historical moment recreated in the film. You know, this movie is just historical moment after historical moment. It makes you, it becomes okay that they make a few little mistakes. But you can see why a movie like this might not be successful today, that it's more about the history, that there's, you know, something like 30 characters that you have to keep track of. If you're making a hit Hollywood film, you really need those two romantic leads played by the hottest new actor, and that's what we got in 1997. And I would never criticize that decision, by the way. I mean, it was the biggest movie ever made, so who am I to say that it was made wrong, which is why I'm not. But the Titanic is getting closer and closer to the bow going under. And now we have a famous moment. We have Isidore and Ida Strauss. We've not seen them until this moment, but they are going to refuse to part, as we've talked about on this podcast. And she even says it, just as it is reportedly said, where you go, I go. And this man here who's talking to them, I now think, based on, I've been trying to figure out who these characters are because they don't often say their names. I believe that is Archibald Gracie. That's supposed to be Archibald Gracie seeing that. And he was one of the witnesses who told us about this, so that checks out. And unfortunately, Isidore and Ida refusing to part is the inspiration for our second-class couple, our newlyweds, to refuse to part, which is just so unfortunate. You guys should absolutely part. Put her in a lifeboat. Now, this moment, this father trying to let his 13-year-old boy in the boat, and this officer, Charles Lightoller, letting him go. Now, this actually did happen, but likely at, not likely, it happened at Lifeboat 4 when it was lowered down to A deck. And the officer said, no more boys. Because it's women and children, not boys. If you're 13, you're no longer a boy in this day and age. Now, the Cosmo Duff Gordons are arguing. I believe there must have been a scene that followed that, because that was kind of an awkward cut to Lightoller looking down the stairs again. Now, this scene I know nothing about. I'm excited to, we're going to read through A Night to Remember in the off season over the next few months. I wonder if this is a moment in the book, because it's not something that I'm privy to, these bellhops smoking while the ship goes down. Maybe it was just added for fun. I don't know. Things are getting a bit more chaotic, slowly but surely chaotic, which I like. Looks like it's raining. Is that just the film? I guess that's just the film, the old film. So now we are meeting Benjamin Guggenheim for the first time. It is kind of interesting that we are meeting characters like Guggenheim, Isidore and Ida Strauss, Archibald Gracie. We're kind of running into these people. And he's not liking the way he looks with this bulky life jacket. We'll see him again in a minute. And now we are at lifeboat number 1. Murdoch is loading it. That fictional Hoyle card player got in. Those are the stand-ins, the Sir and Lady Richard, who are supposed to be the Duff Gordons. So that's very clearly lifeboat 1. And here we have third-class passengers trapped behind gates again. One of the only egregious things. But again, in 1958, this was definitely believed to be the thing. It's only now when we actually have a century of research that we can look back and pretty confidently know that that's not what happened. Now, here's a scene where all the officers are getting firearms to keep passengers in line. Ideally, no one will get shot, but it's good for them to have for safety purposes. That actually did happen. The officers did go back and do that. I believe Lightoller told us about that in his episodes. Still no word from the Californian in the distance. See, I love stuff like this. I love seeing just a married couple saying goodbye in a very honest way. And that had an effect on Mr. Yates here, who has finally abandoned the smoking room. Another rocket in the sky, which will be seen on the Californian. Now here are these stokers who I think were recently released, all running out and running right into a boat. Very lucky. Good for them. And with no one around, Murdoch decides to lower this boat. And it's lowered with only 12 people in it. There's room for 40-something, 45. And it's just a shame, but it's sort of a situation where Murdoch's got to get to the next boat. He's got to get the next boat lowered. Of course, there would have been a better way to do this. In hindsight, there's so many better ways to load these boats, but they were doing their best given very little preparation. I think this movie does a great job of depicting the panic. There's a bit of panic, but it's mostly disorganization that is the problem. I think the 1997 film relies mostly on just showing panic and stressed out people, but this one really shows how disorganized everything is. Now the third class are finally let out of their spaces. Now it's more likely that this is the space that they were held in, and that the gates were holding them back in that outdoor, well deck area. Not they were likely not held all the way down inside the ship. That's truly horrendous. I mean, it's bad if they were held back in either way, but it certainly makes it a little bit less painful that they were out on this well deck area. Oh no, Charles, the chief baker, trying to get back to that drink. Oh no, he's going to have to abandon it. What a brave man. Our second class couple hanging out in the smoking room. Jay Yates writing a letter. He's about to do something with this letter that he also does in the 1990s musical. An old man just reading a book. We talk about this a lot on the podcast, but how much of that is bravery? How much of that is ignorance? How much of that is just resigning oneself? It's questions we'll always wonder. And there's that light. Must have been horrendous to see. Now, this is interesting. This is a big moment here that we need to talk about. We're about to see Ismay's moment of abandoning ship. He's about to get into this lifeboat, and it's very similar to 1997. But there's a big difference. Notice how there are women in this crowd that are trying to get into this boat. They're fighting to get in the boat. There are women in this crowd. Slight pause for Jay Yates to give this letter to this woman, which this is what was believed to have happened, that the real Jay Yates did that, gave a letter to somebody, and then that letter was given to a newspaper. In real life, apparently, Jay Yates gave the letter to a newspaper, pretending that he was on the ship. So I don't know, at what the timeline is on that, but I think at this point that was still the belief. We'll have to look into that. But yeah, so notice how there are women in this crowd, and women are being turned away. There's no more space in this boat. So women, you can see a few of them, and men, they all leave. And now Ismay is about to get into this boat. So I actually think this movie, while they certainly paint Ismay to be less of a villain than in 1997, and I appreciate that he's just kind of a normal guy here. But in this moment, they really do him dirty a bit because he gets in this boat in this moment, just like in the 97 film. But the fact that there were women turned away does make him a bad guy. In his testimony and in other survivors who saw it happen, they all say that when he got in the boat, there were no women around, and that it didn't seem like there were any women willing to get into the boat. So in real life, apparently, he was not as much of a villain. But here they do show him getting in the boat. Lower away. They do show him getting in the boat just after a bunch of women were sent off. So not a great look for Ismay in this film. We rejoin the boys in the wireless room. Really great Phillips performance. So frustrated. For hours he's been just tapping away, screaming for people to come. And that's a real moment there as well. Captain telling the boys that the engine room is flooding, which doesn't really make sense because the engine room probably couldn't have been flooding at any point until the very last moments. But that is something that Captain Smith said, and that's something that he relayed to the Carpathia, which he just did in this film. So the historical fun that we're having is just spot on. Rostron giving some of the orders he was given. Sorry, giving orders that he gave. The engine room's flooded. Another 2 hours. Terrible. Certainly not arriving in time. Love these little models. They do a great job. Like, the set is so good. I don't mind that sometimes we see these terrible models. James Cameron used models as well. It's just a lot more technology. All right, things are getting crazy. So just like in real life, it's time for an officer to shoot some warning shots in the air, which Officer Lowe certainly did, and others did. I don't remember off the top of my head if Lightoller was one. I know he used his gun to make people stand back, but apparently the gun was not loaded, which is something they show in 97. Yeah, things are getting crazy. Now, people claim, like, survivors got off the ship and say that they never saw any panic, and like these people just running around like animals. I guess it really depends on what part of the ship you're on, because gunshots were fired, and I don't imagine they would have been fired unless there really was some panic. So there had to be some. Thankfully, no one gets shot in this movie. Ouch. Not a terrible dive, but that had to hurt a little bit. And now we're in one of the lifeboats with Maggie Brown, Lifeboat 6. Hope I'm right. Sometimes I flip 6 and 8. And now we get our first appearance of Robert Hitchens, who very famously argued with his boat and refused to go back despite the fact that Maggie Brown and others wanted to. This movie does a bit better of a job showing Maggie Brown standing up to Robert Hitchens, and Robert Hitchens having no choice but to listen to her, which the 97 movie actually makes it seem like the opposite, that he got the better of her. Now we're way down forward, close to the bridge, it looks like. Oh, here we go. This would be Lifeboat, Collapsible Boat D, because we have a very famous moment that we've talked about on this podcast, thanks to Archibald Gracie's testimony. Edith Evans giving up her spot. Still here, Miss Evans. So that is Edith Evans. She has her moment in this movie, which she very much deserves. If you don't remember that moment I'm talking about, go back and listen to Archibald Gracie's episode. That was those were two of the women that he had pledged his protection to for the voyage. And now it's time to get Lifeboat B uncovered. And this movie does a great job of showing us the process of the collapsible boat. In the 97 film, we see them falling off the roof of the officers' quarters, but then we almost never see them again. But here, we actually get this scene, and I actually think this scene is too long. Like, why do we have to watch this whole this whole thing? Kind of funny. But yeah, we get to see them uncover this collapsible boat. You can see how it kind of works, that there's like an inflatable part, and then we're off to the orchestra. Now that line he just said, no one really listens to us when they're eating. That's straight in 1997. Like, James Cameron takes that line almost exactly. He says something very similar in the 97 film. So there's some moments where James Cameron took pretty blatant inspiration, and I don't mind. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a great thing. When we're working on Titanic Honor and Glory stuff, all I want to do is make little Easter eggs to Adventure Out of Time and such. We now have Thomas Andrews making his way through the smoking room. That gentleman's still reading his book. And here we are with Guggenheim, with his big moment. We've dressed in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen. Now, as you know, we've talked about on this podcast before, this is a moment that actually happened. Could it have been his bravery? Absolutely. But this likely happened an hour and a half ago. Because it was Etches who told us about that story, and Etches got off in one of the first lifeboats, so that happened a long time ago, as did this moment. Andrew's having his time to think in the smoking room. He was seen in that exact place, but he was seen much earlier in the sinking than these movies depict it. But hey, we're here for the story, and that's a bit of storytelling. We're back to this collapsible boat. They're going to show us the whole damn thing. Now here's a wonderful moment. I love how calm Andrews is in this moment. Because if he goes over to them and just starts panicking, saying, "What are you doing here? You need to get into a boat," which is what he's thinking. You know, he's seeing this woman. What is she still doing on the boat? She has to get into a lifeboat. But he's going over and just making small talk almost. You know, he wants them to come to the decision on their own. Just really wonderful acting, wonderful storytelling. We love it all. Yeah, he knows they're not going to listen to him, so he's just giving them survival advice at this point, which is very cool. A nice little moment for him. And that's a great idea. Wear something white. I wonder if that's supposed to be a bit of a marriage reference. You know, wear something white. They just got married. She was just wearing something white a few days ago. Crazy. So now they are going to get this boat off the roof, and just like in 97 and just like in real life, it just makes no sense that this that this boat is up there and how they're supposed to get it down. There's a proper way to get it down, but no one seems to know, or they don't have the time to do it, so they're just going to slide it down these slats. It's terribly unorganized. Now, here is a wonderful moment. Look at this. We've heard so much about the engineers staying to the end, but we actually get to see them abandon their post because they did. They were allowed to leave. Yes, they all died, likely because they stayed too long. You know, they did their duty as long as they could, and that just made them too late to survive, and that makes them heroes. But let's tell the true story, the true version of it, where they do get a chance to survive. And now we get a moment that we all should recall. We just spoke with Harold Bride about the final moments of their final moments in the wireless cabin. And this monologue from Captain Smith, clearly inspired by the New York Times article. I release you both. And even that monologue, I think, is shorter than what the New York Times said it was, which is very funny. Now, this Stoker sort of tying together deck chairs, they make such a point to show this, and I apologize to some listeners out there who know better than I. That must be a reference to something. We'll find out when we read the book together on Patreon this offseason. And here we go. We have a Stoker stealing a life belt, and it looks like Harold Bride's holding him, and John Phillips hit him, and he falls to the floor, and it's time to get out. So this moment that I said in his movie, or sorry, in his episode, that the movies should show that moment, and this movie at least did, which I think is great because it is such a dramatic thing to have happened. Yeah, this movie could probably be 15 minutes shorter if they would just cut this collapsible boat situation. The Titanic is sinking at such a funny angle in this, or that model is. It's pointed very, very deep. And Lifeboat B is upside down, and it will be for the remainder of the evening. You know, like the angle just doesn't make sense. It should be a shallower thing. But what do I know? I'm no expert on that sort of thing. It just doesn't look right to me. If that's sinking at that angle, then the majority of the ship is out of the water, which is kind of funny. Speaking of funny, this kid and this voiceover, "Mommy, Mommy, where are you?" It's probably the most unpolished part of the film. I think this shot was taken into the 1997 film, wasn't it? This like nice pan up the side of the ship as people on multiple decks run up. I feel like that's straight in the film. Now here's our second class couple. And this is their chance to listen to Andrew's advice and not stay on the ship to the very end. To go down the ropes. Don't jump with those life belts on. If you jump in the water, that is a dangerous situation. You want to lower yourself nice and slowly. Where'd this guy get a ladder? And why aren't more people using the ladders? Okay, so here's a big moment, and this should be very familiar to many of us. We get the moment where the orchestra decides they have done their duty. It has been a pleasure playing with you tonight. And it's time to part ways. But Wallace Hartley, the band leader, he stays behind. He's not going to save himself, so he's going to play one last piece. Nearer, my God, to thee. A different version than what you may be used to, but and then here comes the orchestra back to support him. Clarinet and flute and all. So this is taken note for note in the 1997 film and done brilliantly, and I'm so glad that they did. If there's a moment to steal from A Night to Remember, I think that's it. It's great. And we even get a singing cellist, which is cool. A nice touch in this film. But just like in 97, we get this structure of the orchestra's final piece being this beautiful thing. And as it's being played, we jump from scene to scene around the ship, and we check in with all our little characters, and we see the calmness of a lifeboat. We see these different scenes, and when the song ends, it's time for things to get real. But this is something James Cameron 100% drew from. I wonder where the last moment will be that we'll see Captain Smith. He seems a bit resigned now. He's been doing a good job, like leading everybody. No zombie version of Captain Smith. There's that model again. But when will we see him last? I actually don't remember. Let's keep track. So last time we saw him on the bridge. I wonder if we'll see him again in a minute or not. And the ship is going fast all of a sudden. But I don't know why they would bother trying to get it off the roof. The plan should have been to float them off from the very beginning. It makes so much more sense. You could even just load it with people ahead of time, and then it floats away. But that's collapsible lifeboat A, which will be troublesome. Here's that shot again, panning up the side of the ship while people are running. It's a great shot. Here's that stoker with the deck chairs. Yeah, when we read the book together over the next few months, we'll have to keep an eye out for that, because it's been shown so many times. It has to be in the book. Now here's our second-class couple swimming around in the freezing water, and there's Lightoller. I wonder if they're regretting their decision. They must be. Now here's our chief baker. What is the phrase? 3 sheets to the wind, and he's throwing deck chairs into the water, just as he did do. That is something that he did, and he's seeing that he's helped someone. God, he's so funny. And here's this iconic moment of someone asking Thomas Andrews if he's going to make a run for it. And, again, this did happen, but it happened like now 2 hours ago or something. Yeah, like it happened a while ago So this is Thomas Andrews' big finale. We get to see him with his beautiful ship looking at the clock. And I don't mind giving these very heroic, wonderful characters, giving them a good ending, even though that's not quite how their story really ended. Here's that little kid again. Now, what's interesting is we don't see the first funnel fall, which is such a moment in the sinking for us after all the adaptations of Titanic that we've seen. But in this movie, the first funnel never falls. Mr. Farrell still making a go of it. Jim Farrell is his name, and Jim Farrell is a character in the musical as well. But both of them are like fictionalized versions of a third-class passenger, not meant to be exactly the Jim Farrell that was on Titanic. Love that. And we just have the water slowly taking over the ship. And here's that stoker again. Oof. Gotta be awful. And now this is Archibald Gracie. Again, I had to look up pictures of these actors to figure out who's playing who because they don't say names. But that was Archibald Gracie in the water, not too far from Lightoller. They both had similar experiences. Now, here is an iconic moment in any Titanic film, the moment when everything starts to slide off shelves, down decks. This is something that Walter Lord does make a point to mention in the film, or in the book, and so they did recreate it there, and they recreate it in 1997. That there's just seems to be a moment when everything begins to slide all at once, and it's like a thunderous roar. And that was our Chief Baker making his way to his spot on the stern. And we lose electricity on the ship. The lights go out. And we see Bruce Ismay, unable to look at the ship, just as he told us in his episodes. And that shot of him looking away with the ship sinking in the background, that shot was recreated in 1997, clearly inspired by this movie. And it's around this time that in real life the ship did break in two. As we know, the ship's in two pieces on the ocean floor, but in 1958, they did not know this. They would not know this for quite a few decades. So the oddest part of this movie is that the ship never breaks in two. That might qualify as the biggest historical inaccuracy in the movie. But it's, again, it's not their fault. I always wonder the mentality of jumping versus staying on the ship. People must have known that jumping from such a height would be much more dangerous than just staying on the ship. But both movies depict that. And every iteration of Titanic shows people hopping off purposely. And it's interesting. I don't know. People, I guess, just deciding to get it over with and get in the water and not completely understanding. Now, here's the big moment in this film. It's not the ship breaking in two, but it's the ship suddenly sinking faster, which is described. And we do get a funnel falling here in a second. It's just not the first funnel. We get our third class party. They're still there. That little boy that we just met, still there, with that steward who said that they'd be returning to Belfast. And now here's our funnel falling, and who does it take? Our second class couple. Such a tragic choice by the movie makers here. Those were fictional characters that, just like Fabrizio, like they absolutely did not have to kill them off, but they did. It does add something to the film that we know that plenty of people on their honeymoon were either separated or died. And now we get the passengers doing the Lord's Prayer, which is something we hear from survivors that was done, but I believe on the Collapsible B is where that story comes from. I think we've heard about it on this podcast. We've done so many episodes. Sometimes I forget what we've talked about and what I've been meaning to talk about. Super dramatic shots of people hitting the water. And there she goes. And for 1958, this is just spectacularly done. I'm sure it was quite the sight to go see this film. Ismay still can't look. And so the next part of the drama begins. The various lifeboats arguing about whether or not to go back. And Hitchens refusing to go. Hell yeah, Maggie Brown. So once again, Hitchens kind of losing that fight. I like that. Now here's a moment of Officer Lowe creating his flotilla of multiple lifeboats to reorganize, and so he can put together a rescue party and go back. This all really happened. And while transferring passengers, he will find somebody who doesn't belong. And this is actually in a deleted scene for 1997, and it happens exactly like this. And this is apparently what happened. And this sparked a story that men dressed up as women to be saved. That's kind of a lot for what that was just now. And now here is the Lifeboat 1 with 12 people in it. And the Duff Gordons not necessarily wanting to go back and put their lives in danger. Which this is great. We don't get this in the other movie. In the 97 movie. There's plenty of other Titanic movies, but you know which one I'm talking about. And now we have returned to collapsible Lifeboat B. Men are trying to clamber on top of it. I love this part of the movie. I love that we get to see this drama. There's a deleted clip of it happening, sort of people on the boat. I just think it's such an incredible moment, and it's hard to believe that it didn't make the 97 film because it's such drama that people clambered on the bottom of a boat. It's very epic. So I'm glad that we get to see it here. And we return to the Californian, who's still just staring off in the distance. And look at that. The boat's gone. Great casting with that kid on the right. He seems like the type. And at any point, they could have woken up their wireless operator and just said, hey, reach out to that ship, make sure everything's okay. And here they are. They're going to do the same thing. That steamer that was firing rockets that looked a little queer, it's gone now. All right, write it down. $2:45, I assume, Californian time. I don't know the time difference off the top of my head, but that's why it's 2:45, not 2:20, I assume. This must have been pretty gruesome for people to see back in 1958. And when we all saw the movie in the 90s, action movies had existed for quite some time. We've seen some pretty dramatic stuff. But here, I can't imagine this was easy to watch. So here is probably my second favorite moment of the movie behind the Lucas's. Lightoller returns to the boat, and the man on the boat who's been telling people to leave turns away Mr. Yates there, and there's our man. Goodbye, God bless you. That one of my favorite stories of a man just willingly swimming away to find another place to survive. And in the movie, they depict it as Jay Yates, which is so important because Lightoller knew Jay Yates from the Majestic, and they made eye contact in the smoking room earlier in the movie. And so that was the ending of that story, of them seeing each other, and almost like Yates knowing that he doesn't even really deserve to be on the boat after all the people that he's taken advantage of. And Lightoller, even despite that fact, Lightoller says, no, come back. Like, you can come. You can get on the boat. And he just swims away, sort of accepting his fate. I think that's just wonderful writing to wrap up their little story that stretches back to the Majestic before the movie even began. I think that's great. Now our third-class party has reached Lifeboat B, and there's Archibald Gracie on the right, and Lightoller checking to see if this child, who's clearly a a fake mannequin. But she did not survive, clearly. And then here's a very wonderful shot. This is the deleted scene from 1997 that they recreated that shot of Lightoller, guys, I'm so sorry. Lightoller making people lean right and left to keep the boat steady. And just as we hear from the testimony of survivors, they were checking each other and found that this one or that one had passed, so they would dump it over the side to make the boat a bit higher in the water, and then maybe somebody swimming nearby could get on. And this is exactly how the chief baker survived. He sort of half in the water, half out of the water for much of the night, which is why in his testimony he says that he was in the water for hours. And that's where the whole, well, he was so drunk his blood couldn't freeze. It was that he was, his legs were in the water for a few hours. And so he finally gets into, or onto collapsible B. And just as we hear from Lightoller, he gets the attention of a nearby lifeboat so they can get off that terrible upside down collapsible. I think that's disgraceful. That's from a Witness Titanic witness. Ella White told us about that the crew were smoking cigarettes, and she thought, at a time like this. Ella White makes a lot of appearances in A Night to Remember. And here's Edith Russell with her wind-up pig, keeping the children entertained. And we rejoin the Carpathia here. Captain Rostron still getting that hero's edit. They see something. It's a flare, so it's likely Joseph Boxhall in Lifeboat 2, letting off a little green flare to get their attention. And so they send off a rocket to let the passengers and crew know that help is on its way. And wasn't it Lawrence Beasley who told us that he said that he saw a ship, but he was told, no, it was just, you're not seeing anything. And then when the rocket went off, he knew that he was right. So that was kind of that moment for us there. This movie is just chock full of little references to stories people told. And like this, lighting anything you could on fire to signal. Because you got to think, this is for their own safety. You could get run into by this boat and you're all done for if that were to happen. Now, this is a bit confusing. Murphy here, you would assume he's trying to keep his friend alive, but that's just some random person. His friend that has been with him the whole trip. He's still on the boat, but that's just some random new passenger that he's trying to keep awake. And now we get this interesting moment between Lightoller and Archibald Gracie, where they talk about the overall message from Titanic. Yeah, they're trying to give Lightoller the hero's edit as well, which, maybe he deserves, but every movie needs some heroes, and he's the sort of the lead character if there is one in this movie. So this is their way of sort of creating the hero. And it is finally the following morning. And I believe that's the actual Carpathia. Some footage of the actual Carpathia, not that model. And now during this service, we get to see who survived, which is a nice touch. I believe that's one of the gentlemen from the smoking room. Not exactly sure. We've got Maggie Brown. We've got that woman there who we've seen a few times. We have the entire third-class party, the young people, the two couples, which is nice that they get reunited. We get a first-class woman that we've seen earlier. She was upset about the cigarettes. Arthur Puchin. Some more first-class women. Mr. Hoyle, that fictional character from the smoking room, who decided to leave the card game a little early. We have the Lucas family, without their father, of course. Harold Bride. Second Officer Lightoller, Archibald Gracie, but it's just a great way for us to see the final results of the sinking, who lived and who died. A few more people on that side. And so we've reached the final scene of the film. Our two heroes speaking, Arthur Rostron of the Carpathia and Second Officer Lightoller of Titanic. Just a chance to show more, throw some more historic goodies in here. "705 survivors." Not exactly, but they wouldn't have known that anyway. This movie really is all about the wireless communications. We even wrap up Californian's story here as well. And we get a nice dedication to this disaster and the changes that were made. That we live in a safer world today. There's that rocking horse. The end. Fantastic. Thoughts overall, I hope you enjoyed it. For 1958, it does a fantastic job of illustrating what happened, keeping it grounded in survivor testimony, not going too over the top. A really good job, really admirable job by the filmmakers and producer who saw the actual Titanic get launched. So very effective. James Cameron clearly took so much inspiration from it, and I'm glad that he did. But then he had his job, which was to tell a much larger story. So I don't think you can really even compare the two. They're just almost in different genres altogether. And folks, that's it. Another great Titanic film in the books. Another fantastic season of Witness Titanic in the books. I cannot thank you enough for joining me, for listening to me talk, and to all my patrons out there for supporting this project. If it wasn't for all of you, I'd be watching old Titanic movies and just talking to myself. I much prefer knowing that you are all out there somewhat enjoying this. So again, a Titanic thank you to you all. So for one last time in 2025, I'm your chairman, James Penca. We will now adjourn for a holiday recess and reconvene in the spring to continue our inquiry into the sinking of the RMS Titanic.